All right.
Here
Hey,
we are.
everybody. We're here, Adventurous CMO, EP05. Super excited about our conversation today. It's a privilege and super exciting for both Greg and I to have Kevin Dahlstrom with us. And if anything, probably the most emblematic of an adventurous CMO that we've had on the show so far, and maybe ever. Who knows? Maybe we're at the pinnacle, but. Kevin, we're super excited to have you on the show today and excited about our conversation. Your journey as a multi-time CMO, multi-time founder, an investor. It's just exciting to get the opportunity to chat with you and talk to you about things that we're all passionate about, whether that's brand and marketing or our identity and how we have some semblance of keep our humanity in the process. Just really thrilled to have you on the show today and excited about our conversation.
Nice. Well, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk. We were joking before we started recording that the name of your podcast, Adventurous CMO, those two words are pretty much sum up my life. And in fact, I might steal those and just put those two words on my bio. That's it. Enough said.
Love it. I love it.
That is
Well,
so
I
great.
think it's true, man. I got to meet you earlier in the year at an event, and I was super impressed because for there's a number of different reasons, but one is we have now for over a decade been doing brand transformation work specifically in the B2B, B2C space, but a lot of times it's B2B oriented. And I remember when I met you, you're like, why would you do that to yourself? It's masochistic. But what I loved about it though is you've done it at scale multiple times, which I think for most CMOs that we've worked with, they generally have had other experiences in being a CMO in another organization, but oftentimes they have not actually gone through a full rebrand on multiple occasions at the scale that I know that you have. And so I thought we could start there since it's the kind of easiest place to start. But man, you've done this now multiple times, and you've come in and really helped change and transform an organization kind of at these really critical moments. Tell me about that process. Tell me about what has stood out to you, having done it more than once, and kind of some of the learnings that you took away as a CMO from that experience.
Yeah. So if it's okay, I'll go back a little bit.
Sure.
When I started my career, I was the opposite of a brand guy. In fact, I thought investments in brand were stupid. My education was in engineering and math, and I came out of school when the internet 1.0 was taking off. And where I had my initial success was in very like basically exploiting inefficiencies and in the advertising market, the digital ad, the relatively nascent digital ad market, using math. Basically, it's like the future is all about performance advertising. Brand has no role in this world. And
Right.
and but the funny thing is now my entire career has been built on building brands. And the reason is because what I observed over time is that brand is the rising tide that floats all boats. Companies that invest in brand and do a good job at it, everything becomes easier. Hiring becomes easier. Your digital advertising works harder for you. Everything works better. And really what you need is both. You need, full funnel, right? You need stuff that builds awareness and builds positive sentiment. And you need stuff that harvests that awareness in a hard-hitting way and translates that into business. And so for those that don't know, I've been at it for a long time, so I'm going to have to keep it pretty high level. We can dig in wherever you want. But, over the past 30 years, I've been a 4-time CMO. 3 of those companies were public companies. So I think I'm the only CMO who's rebranded 3 public companies. I've also started some companies along the way, so created my own brands. And I think what I sort of stumbled into is I'm pretty good at identifying companies that have good bones. They're really good businesses and they have lots of potential, but the brand is holding them back. And when I say brand, I speak very broadly because I think about the brand as like everything the company does, including its products. And so as a CMO, I think one thing that's unique about me is I tend to get my hands in everything, especially on the product side. In fact, that's usually the first thing I look at, because my strategy for creating brands was informed by this book that was written in the 90s called The Purple Cow by Seth Godin. It's kind of like insiders in marketing have heard of this book, but nobody else.
Mm-hmm.
And the point of the book is really simple, which is he calls it Purple Cow because the analogy is like if you're driving down a country road and you see a herd of cows, all the cows look the same. None of them stands out to you. If you're driving down that same country road, you see a herd of cows, one of them is bright purple, you only see the bright purple cow. You don't see the herd. And the point of it being like the best marketing is a product or a company that is remarkable. And so my approach to branding and marketing in general has always been, let's start there. Like, let's create something worth talking about. And then to a large degree, the rest takes care of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that book. Do you feel like there are, you talked about being both adventurous and a CMO. Do you feel like there are things that you learned early on in life that like helped you gravitate towards that point of view?
Sort of the adventurous CMO aspect?
Yeah, like where did you encounter adventure or this kind of path in life? An adventurous mindset first.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe I was always wired a little bit that way in that, and I think a lot of marketing type or creative type people are wired this way where like, we're not good at sitting in an office and doing the same thing over and over all day.
Right.
So I recognized that in myself pretty early. I mean, I began my career in management consulting. You don't get any more like sort of buttoned up type of career than that. And I didn't last long for that reason, which is, I wanted variety and I wanted work to feel like an adventure. And so, one thing I wrote something about this a couple days ago. In all of my major decisions in life, I look back and I think, gosh, I put remarkably little thought into that major decision, like whether it's like where I live or who I marry or career stuff. But one thing I always did, no matter what the decision, I was fully committed to it. And I did treat it like an adventure. I sort of followed my gut and I chose jobs that sounded like they would be interesting and fun because I can't fake it. I can't do a good job at something if I don't genuinely care or have genuine interest in it. And so maybe that adventurous spirit, Greg, was always there. And, I used it to kind of inform my decisions. And it's funny because I've never really thought about it this way, but I have always viewed all of my projects, honestly, like whether they're a personal project or a work project, as an adventure. Like that's why we're doing it. We're going to have a lot of fun along the way. We're going to try to reach an interesting place. But we're going to treat it as an adventure.
That's great.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's definitely this like correlation to risk and daring exploration that like if you take any journey that you're on and frankly most of the career path journeys that we are all on, you go back and ask a creative person like what their path to where they are today is, and it's never a straight line of just incremental growth. Oftentimes it looks like a zigzag, and there's like all these different things that have kind of built the flywheel of how we get to where we are. And I love you talking about that because I think it does take risk. It does take not probably having all the answers at the beginning, and that's the same whether it's your life or it's a marketing plan. There's going to be a need to step out and start building maybe without all the pieces.
Well, with no risk, no reward. It really is true. And I'm a big fan in all areas of life in asymmetrical bets. And I think you guys probably know what an asymmetrical bet is. It's one where, you're making a bet, you're taking some risk, but you've set it up so that you've contained the downside, but the upside is unlimited. And it doesn't mean that it's going to work out in every case, but the reality is across a career, if you place enough asymmetrical bets, you're going to have some huge home runs. And as you said, those are the ones that really serve as a springboard for your career. In fact, the first CMO job that I took was for a venture-backed startup in Texas. It was a big career bet. And but I also knew that I was going to learn a lot. So my downside was really contained, and I knew that it had unlimited upside. That company, we ended up growing from 0 to $500 million in revenue. Eventually the company went public, and that parlayed me into the next level of opportunities.
That's great. Yeah, I think, being able to take those risks is great for your career, but also great for once you're in the work, you have to basically do the same thing, right? Whether it's with your teams or with the way that you're getting the brand into the world, we have to be able to kind of minimize the downside and place big bets on things that we're going to enable us to win. So,
well, here's why
love
that's
that.
a really great strategy, is because most people are not willing to take risk. I know that, like, for you guys, you run an agency. That's the bane of every agency's existence, is clients don't want to do anything interesting. And I always viewed that as my secret weapon. Like, my job as CMO, especially in larger companies, 80% of my job is breaking trail and convincing the executive team, the CEO, the board of directors to do interesting things. And I have some very vivid memories. Like, my second CMO job was for a company. When I started with the company, it was called Nation Star. We rebranded it to Mr. Cooper. Mr. Cooper was actually in the news a couple of weeks ago because Mr. Cooper sold to Rocket for $9 billion. So it was a huge home run for everyone. But, when I took over as CMO, it was a like crusty old company that sort of just had done the same thing for 20 years. And I saw a huge opportunity to create a brand around homeownership. I mean, Mr. Cooper is the largest home loan servicer in the world, but I had to convince, but it was a great business, right? It's a cash cow business. I had to convince a board consisting of like 10 60-year-old white men who they're all mortgage guys. They had, wanted nothing to do with marketing or creativity. They thought I was crazy. I had to convince them to like sort of make a huge bet. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. And so as a CMO, that really is like, and again, especially as the company gets bigger, that's like job number one, is not backing down, but like really being able to make the case for taking some risk.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the more iconic naming projects in brand. Tell us about a little bit, like, that's a huge leap that you were able to get people to go on. Tell us about
Totally.
that journey to Mr. Cooper.
Yeah. So that was actually the hardest career decision I've ever made, because, I mentioned, like, I'd had so much success at my prior venture. I was like a made man, if you want to put it in mafia terms. Like, I could have just coasted for a long time and continued to do good work. It was controversial for me to leave, but I just thought I had found something really special. When I joined the company, like I said, they already had scale. They had a huge moat. It was a very profitable business. But to be honest, like, customers kind of hated it. Like, they were the collector for your mortgage and nothing more.
Right.
And customer service was pretty bad. And I said, wow, whether you like it or not, if you're one of our customers, we have a relationship with you around the most emotional and important asset you'll ever have in your life, which is your home. Why can't we create something great out of it? Like, so the idea for Mr. Cooper was originally that, basically this idea that someone in the mortgage business, right? You've got a friend, and we wanted to personify that. To be honest, and I have to give some credit to my friend Krish Menon. Krish is a legend in the brand world. He's worked at a bunch of agencies, but he now has a little boutique called Angry Gods out in LA, actually. And he pitched me this concept and this name at 3 a.m. one day. And I said, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. It's terrible. I hated it. And that's kind of how it goes. Like, one thing I've learned about naming in particular is if a name seems like a great name from the very beginning, that means it's by definition a terrible name. It's not provocative at all. Because the thing about names is it costs you the same to name your company something boring versus something provocative. And being a little bit polarizing is actually a good thing. And so the name grew on me. And then, yeah, we had to pitch, here's a company that, $3 billion company that had a lot to lose, to be honest. But I think one thing that, CEOs and boards of directors don't buy great ideas, they buy results. So what you have to be able to do as a CMO is you have to be able to connect the dots and paint a vision that not only is cool, but more than that, that can translate to business results. And we knew that, for example, if we could increase customer loyalty, we had such massive scale that if we could move the needle even a little bit on our customer loyalty numbers, for example, the financial payoff would be huge. Because ultimately, that's how you have to sell everything in marketing. Like it's all got to create tangible value at some point. Investments in brand tend to be a little bit longer time horizon than, for example, like running a Google Ads campaign. But the payoff can be much bigger as well.
How to make that work, and I know I asked you about this when we were in person a few months ago. What do you think the key ingredient, like to create that environment where, again, there's going to be conflict because you're pushing for something completely different. You're, you're up against, fighting for and proving out that, hey, if we make this investment, we believe there's going to be this impact to the bottom line, et cetera, down the road. But what do you think the key ingredient is in creating an environment where at least you can have those conversations at an executive level and at a level where decisions can actually be made to push the envelope?
Yeah, well, I think the number one, I mean, especially in a bigger company, you have to be able to speak the language of your peers. I used to joke at Mr. Cooper that the executive team was 9 people. It was 8 CFOs and myself. And that actually wasn't far off the truth. Like almost everybody had come up through like the finance ranks, except for me. But the good news is because I had a really deep business background, and in my previous venture, I'd been involved as one of the guys running the company. I was able to speak their language and basically convince them that this was something worth pursuing. And it's also really important to note that when people hear about a rebrand, what they imagine is like it's a new logo, it's a new color palette, it's a new name. That's actually the smallest part of it. That's the easy, that's the fun part, the easy part. The hard part is actually creating a company and creating products that live up to the brand promise. And so literally, it was a 2-year rebrand effort at Mr. Cooper, and 90% of the effort was in like shifting the culture and rebuilding the products. I mean, it's easy to forget. We spent over $100 million on revamping our technology, most notably our mobile app experience. We kind of went from worst to first in our industry for the mobile app. Well, that took a ton of work. There was a ton of technology work that had to be done. We had to go sell this idea to 8,000 employees so that they could actually live the brand. And so all that heavy lifting happens. The brand, the color palette, the logo, the beautiful website, the name, that's like just the icing on the top.
I think you're totally right. I mean, I think brand transformation is internal and external, and it's so much more than the facade of what external marketing looks like after the fact. And but oftentimes that is critical elements that people can miss, right? Like there's sometimes to build it, and it will come type mentality of change the visuals, and you've got a change of an organization. And I think we've learned and seen time and time again that will not get you to where you want to go, and oftentimes actually leads to a worse. You end up in a worse off place because now there's a lack of trust in between your customers and your the organization, because now you're saying something that you're not backing up.
That's right. It's the lipstick on the pig model, and you can fake it for a little while, but long term you can't fake it. If you don't live up to the promises you're making, then customers know very quickly. And in fact, the best way to spread the word about a great brand is through word of mouth, just doing a good job with customers. Like, again, people think of like a brand campaign as a Super Bowl ad or advertising or whatever. And that's the only role of advertising is to amplify a message that's already solid. And so the first thing I always do is like, I try to paint a vision of like, what would a great brand look like in this category? and let's build that. And then the advertising piece is easy. We can go amplify our message. That's just a matter of pouring some money into the equation.
For sure. Yeah, I feel like, if you can do that well with your customers and with the customers you're bringing into the organization, you're set up for success. It's true. You can stand behind it. Customer storytelling gets a lot easier. Your people can trust what you're saying. Do you, in terms of, it sounds like product has been really key to your journey and being involved there. When you think about your time at Mr. Cooper and Embark and the places where you've been in that CMO role, do you feel like there's a consistency or like a red thread? What was the key to success at each one of those stops?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my secret formula for building great brands has 2 steps to it. Step number 1 is figure out what makes this company special. And if a company has traction at all, there is something that
Right.
There's a reason customers are buying, right? Sometimes it's not super clear, but first we do the research to figure out like, what is the one thing that really makes this company special? And then step 2 is crank it up to 11. So really embed that thing, double down on it, make it clear in everything that you do. And actually my favorite example of this, I did a rebrand for a public bank in Hawaii called Central Pacific Bank. And it was maybe the most fun assignment I've ever had for obvious reasons. I got to live in Hawaii during the pandemic. But that was such a fun assignment because it was a great example of a bank that had incredible bones, like this incredible history, had a clear differentiator, which is really genuinely caring about its customers. You could feel it, but it sort of lost its way from a brand standpoint. It kind of, started to look like every other bank on the mainland. And so we called, and every time I do a rebrand, we hone in on what I call a core brand idea, which is like a very simple, like often 2-word statement of what is the thing that makes this company special. In the case of this bank in Hawaii, it was radical humanity. So the idea that banks are not known for being human, but here's this bank that was not only human, but radically human. Like there's stories you would hear from customers were just mind blowing. But that wasn't evident in the way that the brand looked or acted a lot of the time. And so we took that core brand idea and built an entire brand around it. It was a super fun project, but it's funny, like that formula, it sounds simple, and it is, but it's hard to do. It's easy to say, hard to do. But I've that's the same formula, that I've used and across multiple CMO gigs. And in fact, one of my proudest achievements is that along the way, a lot of the people who have reported to me on my marketing team, in particular, I always have like a head of brand. They've then gone on to be CMOs and have used the same formula. So this like little thing I've developed has started to spread in the world.
I love keeping it simple. I love that the work you did there is so cool too, because the positioning feels so authentic to the islands, but also to Hawaii and to who their audience is. It's awesome because it's like truly authentic. Doesn't feel performative at all, and that's hard. That's hard to do in a very kind of rigid environment of finance. So it's really cool to see.
Yeah, thank you.
You brought up people reporting to you. I was going to say, like, as you've gone through these large projects, as you've worked through your career, how have you managed and led the people around you through all of that change? Like, do you have like a simple kind of formula for creative leadership, or how do you go about managing teams?
I do. Well, the way I structure teams is mostly a product of the fact that I hate all the HR crap that comes with having a direct reports. And so I keep things absurdly simple. My typical structure is I divide my marketing organization into 2 groups, brand and demand, right? And so, they're pretty self-explanatory, right? I typically have a head of brand who reports to me, who runs all things brand, which are basically like things where it's like difficult to draw a straight line between the investment and revenue. And then demand is the opposite of that. They're kind of more bottom of funnel, doing all the things that harvest the good work that we're doing. Some things like social media sort of straddle the middle, and you can make a case to put them on either side. But that's how I've always managed the world. And my approach has been, I'll borrow a term from. There's a guy named Yvon Chouinard. He's an ex-rock climber. He's the founder of Patagonia. He wrote a book called Let My People Surf. And in that book, he described his management style as the MBA style, and MBA being management by absence. I always felt like, I'm never been good at staying in an office for very long. And I'm not a super detailed leader. I can be. And so the way I tend to operate is I hire super talented people to run brand and demand, people who are well on their way to becoming a CMO themselves or a CEO themselves. And I kind of stay out of the way, but I will say there's two situations where I will go deep very quickly. One is where I see that there's a problem. Like if we're having a customer acquisition problem, our CAC is too high, whatever. The other is if it's something that's like a pet project of mine that I'm super passionate about. And often that's in the world of like what we're doing with the product or the visual design, the advertisements, whatever. And so I'll go deep in those areas. But beyond that, my direct reports run the day-to-day operations of marketing. So, and I always think of myself as the CEO of the marketing team. And I think that's how all C-level executives should think. Like if you're a CFO, you're actually the CEO of the finance department, right? And that implies a lot of things in like a lot of the ways you should behave. When you get up to be a C-level, like a CMO, the job isn't to just like keep doing the hands-on work you've always been doing. You have to be able to replace yourself a little bit and abstract sometimes from the day-to-day work, because it's your job to be thinking forward a little bit, to be thinking a little bit more. You have that luxury, ideally. And so at least that's my excuse for saying no to meetings.
That's great. I love that you brought up Yvon Chouinard. I know we've both read Let My People Go Surfing. Talk about we can kind of transition into your journey into where you're at now and your love of the outdoors and this idea of kind of reaching the pinnacle and finding your next stage in life.
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with kind of the thing that a lot of people find most interesting about me is not my work stuff. It's the fact that I pulled the plug on my career at the peak. And I can go way back. I mean, look, I'm Gen Xers and we're kind of notorious for like just putting our heads down and grinding. And, when I came from pretty humble beginnings. And so when I came out of school way back when, I just wanted to do whatever I needed to do to reach the top. Like I was pretty maniacal. Like I had a model in my head for what success looked like. And I put my head down and I went for it. And it worked. Like over the years, I like kind of rose up the ranks, reached the top of the business world. What I never considered is that there's a difference between a great career and a great life. And I'd built a great career. In fact, on paper, it was like a dream career. I had like the dream life that everybody wants, like high paying C-level job, beautiful family, McMansion in the suburbs, like all the fancy things, the perks, whatever. But I was less happy than ever. And so in 2018, literally at the pinnacle of my career, I pulled the plug on my career with really no plan going forward. I quit my job. We moved to Boulder and started to rebuild life. And back to the adventure side of it, it was a sudden change, but it had really been a virus that had been growing inside of me for a long time. And the catalyst for that was probably the biggest catalyst, at least, was rock climbing. Back in 1999, a friend of mine took me to one of the early climbing gyms in Dallas, Texas. And I was kind of hooked from day one. I mean, I liked everything about rock climbing. I liked the physical act. I liked the fact that it was a mental challenge. I liked the beautiful places that it took you. And I especially liked the community. In fact, now I say, I came for the climbing, I stayed for the community. But what it exposed me to was a whole world that exists that I never knew existed, where your value wasn't based on your title or your net worth or your business accolades or any of that. And really, it spoke to me at a very deep level. It felt like I'd finally met my tribe. It felt so real to me. And so, fast forward over the years, that virus slowly grew in me, where my measure of success had changed. By the time I reached the top of the corporate world, my measure of what success looked like had changed. And so, one of my friends, Mike Brown, says, like, a lot of guys go through this. We're like, you reach the top of the mountain only to realize you climbed the wrong mountain. So you're looking out, you're at the peak of the mountain, and I'm like, oh, well, it's nice to be at the top here, but that's the actual mountain I wanted to climb. So you go back down and you reclimb. And, I don't know if there's a way to learn that lesson any other way than the hard way, like I did. But I share my journey a lot. As you guys know, I write a lot on X, or used to be Twitter, about that journey. And it seems to resonate in particular with men.
There's definitely an angst that exists of like trying to do that. And I do think everybody wrestles with like, how do you balance or maybe a better way to put it would be, how do you not lose yourself in the process of trying to become whatever you are vocationally. I've always been inspired by how you talk about it, because I think it's a good reminder that, our world's not one track, right? Like, it's not one trail. Like, we all have different, there's the old, hiking adage, hike your own hike. Like, everybody's book and chapter looks different. Everybody's story looks different. And what happened to you and how you became a CMO may look entirely different than how someone else did it and does it, and everything in between. But oftentimes, if we're not, there's no surety in who we are.
Well, I think you hit it on the head, who we are. This is really an issue of identity. And again, this is something that men seem to struggle with in particular, where we're told that our identity should be our work and nothing else, really. Like, maybe, there's a little family sprinkled in there. I've found that that's a road to nowhere. A lot of people have learned that the hard way. So I'm a big advocate of building what I call multidimensional identity. So when I say I rebooted and moved to Boulder, that all sounds glamorous and it's nice, but I still work. Like, I'm still passionate about my work. It's just that work doesn't dominate my identity anymore. I actually believe I'm 54 years old, and I believe that my best work is still ahead of me, not behind me. In fact, after I did the reboot, I did the rebrand at that bank in Hawaii. I did a rebrand at a consulting firm called Embark in Dallas. And there's going to be more great work in my future, but I've established more balance, right? Where if you ask me, like, what's the single biggest part of your identity? I probably think of myself more as a rock climber now, to be honest. And, if you look at how I spend my time, that's probably reflected on my calendar. And so to me, that's a healthier way to live. Worth noting, though, it's a privilege that you earn. You can't just, when you're 25, you can't just say, well, work's only going to be 20% of my identity. No, there's a season for everything. And, but the point is, don't like wait for this mythical date in the distant future called retirement. Start slowly gaining control and be deliberate about it from a very early age, so that when you're in your 40s and your 50s, you do have more balance.
I love that. And it's not only true of life, it's also when you're in your work, it's also true of your work too. I talk to our creative team and our clients' creative team so much about how doing the work can't be your identity in the moment, whether it's the project you're on or the idea that you have. You have to be able to live outside of that, because we all know ideas get shot down. Mr. Cooper was a big idea that couldn't have landed, and then all of a sudden what does that mean to you? And so I think it's so important to have life beyond work, and also have an identity beyond the work that you're doing.
Well, also this it begs this question of like, what is work? And this is especially relevant for creatively wired individuals, which I am, is like, if I'm out climbing and I have a great idea for my work project, was I working or was I climbing, or does it even matter? I tend to be, to the extreme. I tend to be results oriented with myself and with my team. And what that means is we have extremely high standard for delivering results. We don't care how those results are created. We measure output, not input, right? I don't care where you were, how many hours you put, like best idea wins and best results wins. And so that's a big part of like, you got to creating that kind of environment, in my experience, creates the best results.
Has that caused you, has that caused any, like, how do you view discipline, or like just the focus to do that? Meaning, like, because there is the, like, manifestation of, if you do something long enough, we have a friend named Ryan Berman that talks about like creativity. It's like going to the gym. Like, if you go to the gym and you've never deadlifted 300 pounds, chances are you're not going to be able to lift it. But if you've been going regularly and you've built muscle, you may be able to do it, and it'll look like magic, but it's not magic. It's the fact that you put in the reps and had the discipline to do it over and over and over again. I'd be curious your perspective on that. Like, being results oriented doesn't mean hope, wait for this like manifestation of magic to happen. It's really about putting in the right amount of work. And then, I'm just curious. Tell me more about your perspective 100%.
On that. Great work doesn't just appear out of the ether. It's often the result of just consistent hard work. What I'm speaking to is, that doesn't have to have, like, the corporate world will tell you there's one specific manifestation of that, which is you go to an office every day and sit at your desk from 8 to 5. That model never really worked that great, especially for creatives. There's no avoiding doing the work. You got to do the work. And, it's easier to do the work if you're passionate about it. And I found personally that it's easier to do the work if I can control when it happens. Like, creatively wired individuals, we like to work when we're inspired. In fact, I right before this podcast, I had a phone call with the biggest hitter that I know in business. This guy, like, I'm talking like he's freaking huge. Like, he's huge. And I was so inspired after that call. Like, I wanted to go run through a brick wall, So I work when I'm inspired, and often like climbing makes me feel inspired, or, having a good conversation makes me feel inspired. What doesn't make me feel inspired is sitting in a friggin' office, in some soulless downtown area after having driven 1 hour each way to work, that just doesn't work for me. For some people it does.
Yeah, for sure.
Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, you said something interesting about the time. If you like looked at the time on your calendar, you'd identify more as a rock climber. And that's kind of a proof of that. I think it'd be great for everybody to hear kind of like, what's the day in the life? Like, when, what do you spend your time doing? And what's the mix of time to get results these days? Like, what does the new life look like?
Yeah. So, I love this question. Cause this is something that I've got a lot of experience in that actually not many people have had the privilege to deal with. It's like, when you gain control, what do you do with that control? And it's a really important point, because a lot of people think that the highest form of success is like being able to wake up every morning and do whatever you want to do. And I would argue that is not the highest form. That's half the equation. So half the equation is gaining control of your time. The second half, which is actually the harder part, is how do I use that time to create meaning in my life? Whether you're a billionaire or you're broke, you're still awake for 16 hours. And it sounds hard to believe when you haven't been there, but when you have literally nothing on your calendar, no commitments, no skin in the game, that's a horrible existence. My eyes were really opened before I experienced it myself. One of my best friends was a really great NFL player. He played for 10 years in the NFL, offensive lineman, made a ton of money, retired at age 33. And he used to always tell me, Kevin, I'm so freaking bored. I don't have anything to do with my time. And I was like, whatever, dude. Like, I would love to have your problems. And then I experienced him for myself, and he was right. Like, it's a hollow existence. And so, the real question is, how do you create meaning? So, long-winded way of answering your question, Greg. But the thing is, you have to have skin in the game. So I think that's why I continue to do work stuff. I'll do things like sign up for speaking engagements that are tough, but force me to get my shit together and do the work. But the privilege that I do have, back to your point about like what's a day or what's a week look like, is I've earned the privilege of on Sunday looking at the weather forecast, and I pick my days that I want to block out for climbing, and I'll line up a climbing partner. Climbing something you need a partner to do. And then I let everything else fill in around that. I've got, I still do meetings. I've got deliverables I have to deliver. But I'm able to do that again in focus on the result, not the way the result is achieved.
That's so great. And I feel like the reality of most people is that they can probably afford themselves some version of that now, whether they think they can or not. What is the version of that level of kind of autonomy and organization and control that they can create for themselves wherever they're at in their career? How can I achieve something that like gets me a little bit closer to where I feel like I have meaning, or I feel like I'm more myself?
Well, and that's a great insight. And the ticket to gaining control is delivering results. Like these things are tied together because I'll tell you a funny story. So I won't say which company it was, but there was a public company that I worked for, and then I left that company, and there was an all hands meeting with like all the employees, and the CEO got on stage and he was talking about innovation, and he cited me as an example of someone who's innovative, but he added in a little jab, which is, he said, the problem with Kevin is I couldn't get him to come into the office. And, truth. But the reason is he was joking and not joking. He probably would have rather me been in the office. He was an office guy. He probably would have rather me been in the office from 9 to 5 every day. But the fact that I delivered results was my ticket to working the way that I want to work. If you're not delivering results, then yeah, you're going to come under the microscope. Yeah. But to your point, Greg, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can start to slowly gain control of your life. And the number one way to get there is by delivering excellent work and excellent results. Like think about it, your clients at Grizzly, if you deliver a breakout idea that spikes revenue, do your clients care whether you put 10 hours into it or 1,000 hours?
Never.
Yeah. So the beauty of marketing, by the way, is it's one of the few career fields where ideas still matter, right? So like in a lot of fields, like it's just like, how hard are you willing to work? And that was never that interesting to me. In marketing, it's still true that, your competitor might outwork the heck out of you, but if you have a better, more elegant idea, you're going to win.
Mm-hmm. So I'd venture to guess that with AI and the tools that we have now, that ideas matter more. When the production and the work is democratized, what goes into it is actually more important than ever. We have to be able to have a great idea and tell stories that are human. And the other person over there the other person that maybe didn't want to put in the time before, now they all of a sudden they have the tools to make it seem like they did. And
it's true. And one quick note on AI, because I've kind of gone all in on AI, and it's radically transforming marketing, as you guys know, is that in the AI era, the role of the curator becomes really important, because AI can produce a lot of work very quickly, but as of now, at least, you still need that curation aspect, which is great for me because I've always been a curator. Like as a CMO, I have agencies bringing ideas to me all the time, and I'm a buyer of ideas, right? And I've always been really good at sort of having a knack for what's a good idea and what's not. And that's really what you're doing when you're engaging with AI and marketing, like you're the CMO and AI is your team, and AI is bringing you all these ideas, and some of them are good, some of them are crappy. And so you have to be really good at that curation aspect.
I think it's funny because it comes full circle back to the purple cow reference at the beginning, which is differentiation. Even with all of these things, differentiation becomes all that much more important. And while which means that great ideas still have to rise to the top, and there needs and bravery and courage to act on it and be adventurous enough to go, keep going where the trail is leading, and keep pushing forward, believing that the best is yet to come, which again gets increasing, economic uncertainty. All these things can run up against that. But I think those that are adventurous and courageous and willing to keep going are often going to be a step closer to whatever's on the other side than those that get too afraid to keep walking the path.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about marketing that's interesting is, unlike other fields, is like 80% of the things you try in marketing are not going to work. It's the 20% that you then double down on that make all the difference. And that's back to this idea of asymmetric bets. Your job is to take risks, but smart risks, to place a bunch of asymmetric bets, knowing that a bunch of them will not work out, but one or two will work out. And those are the ones you double down on. And you just like repeat that process over and over. And that's AI is just going to accelerate that entire process.
For sure. Yeah. I think my favorite thing, I don't know, we'll probably need to wrap up soon, but my favorite thing that you said, given where you are at in your career, is that you believe the best work is ahead of you. And I think that's something that's just so rare, that narrative of optimism right now. And so maybe you could leave us with a little advice in terms of kind of just how you stay connected to that optimism and belief that the best is yet to come.
I love that, because this is something I feel so strongly about. So I'm going to drop something on you that to many listeners is going to sound kind of woo-woo or out there. But it really is true, is whatever you believe, you're right. Beliefs become incredibly self-fulfilling, I think, for a couple reasons. One is because beliefs inform your behavior in ways that we don't even fully understand in the moment. If you believe your best work is yet to come, you're going to probably start doing things that lead to great work. If you believe your best is behind you, then that mindset will be self-fulfilling as well. But the woo-woo part of it is that I believe there's something more to it, even at like a metaphysical level, where like the energy you're putting out absolutely has a real impact on the world around you. And so I think there is, like, quantum physics is increasingly sort of proving out this sort of idea that like intent and energy matter. Mm-hmm. And so, the problem with being a pessimist is that even if you're right, it's a miserable way to live. So why not choose to be an optimist?
I love it.
That's
Kevin,
amazing.
Where can people find you online if they want to keep hearing the wisdom and learnings about your life and about your journey? Yeah.
So 2 really quick plugs. My hub is X, formerly known as Twitter. My account is at Camp4, CAMP and the number 4. It's a climbing reference from Yosemite National Park. The last thing I'll plug is I'm actually putting on, if all this stuff we've been talking about resonates with you, especially the part about, a great career not being the same as a great life. I've got a passion project that is happening this September. I'm putting on a men's event here in Boulder. It's called Base Camp. If you go to basecamp2025.com, you can read all about it, see the agenda. There's still, it's mostly sold out, but there's a few slots remaining. So if this stuff really spoke to you today, check out that event and sign up.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for your time today. This has been so encouraging and exciting to just hear your perspective on this stuff. And we just appreciate immensely you taking time out of the day to make it happen today.
Yeah. Great to see you guys. Nate, maybe we'll see you again in Mexico.
Yep. Absolutely, man.
Thanks everybody.
Kevin. Take care, guys.